Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. Welcome to Travel with Cindy Brown 14. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences with the School for International Training, aka SIT, and that was the program that I did in Argentina, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I've talked about it a lot, I think, with some people individually and at different times throughout the semester, but I feel like I haven't really talked about it a whole lot since I've been back because I didn't want to, and because I was just like, and am still recovering mentally and physically and emotionally. But I wanted to touch on some things in my experience with SIT and just like some things I think that the general public and prospective students should know before studying abroad with SIT in particular. Disclaimer, I'm not speaking for any other program in terms of like CIEE or like any of the other agencies. I don't even know what to call them. I'm only talking about SIT in this video. And this is also all anecdotal. This is what my experience was. And this should come as no surprise to the people that I was in Argentina with. Like, I was very open about my thoughts in regards to SIT. I also was with my feedback forms at the end of the semester, and I also was in a couple personal meetings with my professors/advisors down there. So this is not the first time I've had these conversations about SIT. So you can probably guess I am going to go to bed after I film this video, but I need to get these thoughts off my mind. And also, this is going to be maybe a little bit all over the place. I apologize in advance. So the first thing I want to say about SIT is that they market themselves as not your ordinary study abroad. And let me tell you, it was not your ordinary study abroad. But also it was ordinary study, but abroad. That's what I have to say about that, because pretty much the entire time I did this program, I felt like a US student. And partially, obviously, like, I was not in a direct enrollment. I was not directly enrolled in another institution in Argentina. I was doing this program with 18 other students from across the US. So that alone kind of sets it apart from the direct enrollment style study abroad. But the problem with SIT was that it just felt like SIT themselves, this has nothing to do with my advisors in Argentina, none of them, but SIT as an entity, I don't think it has the most effective practices. I understand where they're coming from in terms of like, okay, we want you guys to have this big research experience at the end of your semester and or an internship experience of your choice. Obviously, I chose the internship, but both in class, on field trips, I would say less so than when I was actually in class, but class times and my internship, it just felt like a lot of US ideals and standards were being pushed on me the entire time. And they were not easy. Like, I had some rough days. And academically, I obviously struggled a little bit because my entire course load was in Spanish. And that was something I signed up for. That was something I wanted initially going into this experience. But I was honestly expecting a little more leeway in terms of like, or not even leeway, but a little more flexibility. And it's hard because it also felt to me as if these ideals were also being pushed onto my professors and advisors, which also made it hard at the same time because they don't want to be, stressing us out. Like, I think that's a very mutual feeling and understanding. And there were a lot of people in my group that were constantly like reassuring, like, this isn't harder than a semester at blank school. I agree and disagree with that. Like, I think to a certain extent, it was not harder than a U of R, semester, but it was also way harder than a U of R semester at the same time. So it kind of goes both ways, and that's a huge thing I want to point out. And I think that I especially had a problem with the whole like heavy US ideals present in my study abroad program. I think I had a problem with this just because the intention that I set for myself at the beginning of the semester was full immersion, language immersion, cultural immersion. Like, I am here because it's not the US. And like, it felt like a lot of the US was very much present in the classroom, obviously because of, shit in writing and whatnot, and just like the function of SIT as a whole. In my internship experience in particular, it was hard to kind of find the balance between SIT, US SIT, and then, okay, I'm working with an organization local to Buenos Aires, to Argentina, to toda de Latino America, like in general. And so it was really hard to kind of differentiate where am I? Like, it was weird kind of being in the middle of it all of the time, and I think that one could make the argument that you're kind of in the middle inevitably as an exchange student, fair, but in terms of SIT, like I said, as an agency, like the whole not your not your ordinary study abroad, I'm like, dude, this is US study. Like, I feel like a US student studying in a US classroom, but we just so happen to be in another country. And I kind of had a problem with that, and I'm not going to lie, I did complain about that pretty consistently throughout the trip. And I think that's just not trip, sorry, semester. And I think that's just something to like be subconsciously aware of if you choose to go through with an SIT program. And I talked to a couple friends about this pretty consistently throughout the semester. And I even told one of my friends, like, if you do not want to spend 6 hours a day in class for 6+ weeks, it's technically 6 weeks, but even the field trips we went on were exhausting, and it was basically class time even on those trips 90% of the time. And if you want more free time, then go do direct enrollment. Like, that is 100% something that I believe. I mean, being on the clock in a full Spanish immersion for class purposes alone for 6 hours a day was so exhausting, and I did lose my mind quite a bit. It was really hard, and I definitely had some moments where I dissociated, like, for a while. I mean, the month of September especially, I did not retain anything in any of my lectures. And part of that was the language barrier and me trying to get it together, but it didn't help that I was stressing myself out and constantly anxious because, being in that building for 6 hours every day was just so hard and exhausting. And, I guess the other thing about SIT is, like, it is study abroad. It's not like I'm going abroad, like, with SIT, I felt like I was studying abroad. Also something I want to reemphasize. And it's the other problem I had with SIT was I had a rough start at the beginning, as a lot of people know, at the University of Richmond, and as pretty much everybody in my study abroad group in Argentina knows, that I had a freaking rough ass start at the beginning, because I was told, like, you're not competent enough, you don't have, enough language skills to do this program, like, you don't have enough experience, etc. And I was steered away from SIT's staff to not do this program. And when I brought this up to my advisors and professors in Argentina, they were like, what? Like, I had no idea. I mean, because how are they supposed to know? I mean, this all happened February 2024, months before the application was even due. I was told, like, you should probably think about doing something else. But I definitely had to resist a little bit. And that was really demeaning, like, being told by somebody who works at SIT, like, you cannot do this, like, I don't think you have enough skills. That was really sucky. And honestly, that was just the start of, like, my entire student identity being rebuilt and reconstructed in Argentina, because I literally felt like I was at phase 1 as a student. Like, I have never felt so out of place in the classroom in my entire life. And I definitely felt that way initially when I first got to the University of Richmond, especially like my second semester freshman year. But even after that, like I definitely felt myself adjusting. But in Argentina and that environment, like I was constantly like, it was just coming back up in my head, like, Charlie, you were told you can't do this, like they were right. And like, I hate to say that and I hate to feel that way about myself, but when things were hard, like that's where my mind was going, you know what I'm saying? And so there was just a lot of pressure, like at least in my experience in the start with SIT, because it felt like I had a point to prove, which eventually I discovered no, like I'm doing this for me. I have a point to prove to myself. Like, I don't give a shit about what the staff at SIT say about me. And that was something that I had to learn and kind of practice over time in the semester. I think that I am going to write a little bit more about some of my lessons learned with SIT in particular. I think that those will come to me a little bit more in the coming weeks as well, as Brazil gets closer, but also because they asked me to join their alumni network, and my advisors were like, we want you to come to the orientation call for the next cohort. And I'm really excited to do that because I want to talk about what my experience was like, and I want to give some clarity to people that might have questions. Like, I feel like that's the least that I can do, and that's also the intent of my travel blog and making travel videos, things like that. So look out for more on this topic, but there's definitely some things kind of like what I've talked about in this video thus far that I really wanted to explain, like speaking out loud and not just through my writing, because I want y'all to hear my tone and like truly kind of grasp how I feel about SIT. In terms of how I feel about SIT right now in this moment, my relationship has gotten better. I definitely got some closure in the last couple weeks of the program. But even like at the end, like, I'm sorry. Tell me, here's a big problem I had with it. And this is in regards to the internship. I signed up to do an internship because I knew I wouldn't be able to have one this upcoming summer. I was going to be in Brazil, so I chose the internship. Why did I still have to write a 15 to 20 page research report that was supposed to be integrated into the internship, which the organization doesn't have that great or that big of an idea? Like, it's not communicated to them. Like, a lot of it is coming through us, and then on top of that, it's in Spanish, and it's just a lot. And like that alone, it was like up until I finished that goddamn report, I finally was like, okay, I need to seek some closure from SIT. And for me, that was being brutally honest in my feedback. That was being brutally honest in my final meeting with one of my advisors. And that will be being honest as somebody in like the alumni network and in the upcoming orientation, because I feel like I didn't get that full clarity initially, and it felt like I really had to navigate some things for myself. And it would have been really nice, I think, this time last year, in the spring of 2024, to have had somebody be like, hey, this happened to me, just having somebody there to empathize a little bit. And I know I'm not the only student to have felt this way, but going into it, nobody else was like, oh, that happened to me too. So it was kind of hard to like gauge that and work around that for sure. Once again, I hope that this video kind of gives a little bit of clarity, obviously, and like I have said in several blog posts already, like a lot of what I'm talking about is just scratching the surface, and it's just the beginning of me talking about some of these themes and study abroad and travel experiences in general. So I'm hoping that this kind of gets the conversation started a little bit in regards to SIT, and also to just share that, like, regardless, I have immense gratitude for them, for my experience, but there's definitely some things that I would have switched around, and some things that I think people need to know when going into a program with SIT in particular. And if you would like to learn more about some of my previous experiences, you can go to my travel blog at Travel with Brown 14, link in bio, link everywhere. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, if you have questions or anything, you can DM me on Instagram or you can send me a message through the travel blog. Thanks for listening.